Okay, so let's begin by just reading the list of the 5 things that we fixed in this session. Leak number 1, being recklessly loose pre-flop in a high-rake environment. This is 50 NL on GG Poker, Russian cached. It's a really high-rake game. You just can't be playing hands that are losing in theory for the most part. And the student was doing this all the time, just getting involved in spots that were just losing pre-flop. A bunch of you guys are doing this as well. I'll show you the spots that come up today that exemplify this one. Leak number 2, continuing far too far into hands when you should be folding earlier. Generally, this happens in underbluff spots where people just aren't applying enough pressure, where you need to be letting go of your hand a street earlier. This causes a really bad red line because you end up just like continuing too far to then ultimately fold. This is definitely a big one. Leak number 3 is not getting enough value with your big hands, not betting big enough. This student has a real sizing leak on the river, as you're going to see in this session. Perhaps you do too. Leak number 4, sloppiness, attention span, emotional regulation, playing for way too long, low willpower during sessions, kind of mental game stuff. But yeah, the main theme here is that the student was playing for way too long, like 2 hours, 3 hours at a time, stuff like this. Very, very bad idea. If you're playing for 2 hours straight without a break, you're literally decimating your game. The other day, somebody posted on our Discord community. To join that, by the way, you've got to grab a Carrot Poker School course or get some one-to-one coaching with yours truly. Check those services out at Carrot Corner. But in our Discord group, we have tons of really interesting conversations. And one of them that came up was someone posted their win rate over a very big sample when they played under an hour and when they played for over an hour and a half. And it was night and day. It was like a 6 BB per 100 difference. Honestly, this is a big one. And then finally, slow playing too often against mergy, fish ranges. When your opponents have a lot of mediocre hands in their range and they're stationary, you don't want to slow play and hope that they bluff you. You just want to get value with your big hands. So I'll talk to you guys about when each of these leaks come up. Queen 10 on the button here, we open. It's called by big blind, 9-7 deuce, two-tone is the flop. We go for a big bet here, which is obviously fine, and villain raises to 11. So this is a weaker player. There's no money here left behind. Usually what happens in this spot is that either you're dealing with someone that's like kind of maniacal and tilted and is going to start putting like loads of their money in the middle later as well, or you're dealing with someone who just has a really strong range, has like 2 pair sets, top pair, over pair, maybe 10s, but I don't think jacks plus is really here, or maybe just some like random mergy hand like 8s or ace-7 or something that they've decided now is the time to put lots of money in the middle with. What you're not going to see a lot of here is really low EV bluffs, and what you're not going to see a lot of here is people raising the flop, like random short stack fish raising the flop to then just check fold the turn. That's not going to happen very often. This hand is probably a fold even in GTO. It's probably a losing flop call against the sizing, although maybe it's kind of close, but I think it's probably just a fold, and we make the call in an environment that's worse than the theoretical environment. Like, this is the no-no. You should just be folding the flop here. What happened on the turn here is just really typical. This is going to happen all day long in this spot. This is a good example of continuing too far into hands, decimating the red line by not folding soon enough in a spot that's just going to be really miserable for you. Definitely don't make this flop call, even if in theory it's just about passable. And again, I'm not even sure that it is. Queens here, open under the gun, called by button. Squeezed by the big blind, and we decide to make the call. This is fine. 8-5-3. This is some kind of weaker player. By the way, that was the only thing that we knew. Villain goes ahead and bets 16 big blinds. I think this is a really easy call. Not much else to do on the flop here. And then 47 bigs on the turn. So this is a player that's squeezed under the gun against button against big blind. Just ask yourself, what does that range look like already? Like pre-flop? And then how does it play post-flop? Could villain have jacks or 10s? Like, yeah, it's certainly possible. But the thing is that these are really unlikely now compared to aces and kings. And this is also like a really underbluff spot. Like, the amount of the time that someone has a hand like ace king here or something like that is going to be pretty infrequent. So, okay, if this is a really spewy player, like maybe we do have to just go with this and, you know, call turn, call river, or jam turn, or whatever you want to do here. I don't think it's going to make a ton of difference, but I'd probably rather just call turn, call river. There might be some times here where villain doesn't go for all the money on the river. The river comes a card that stops them value betting, and, you know, you get away scot-free against the aces and kings on the river. But I think in general here, this is a spot where you actually just want to exploitatively fold jacks here and probably queens as well. And the reason for that is that jacks and 10s pre-flop are very likely to actually just, well, they're more likely than aces and kings to just flat call here, so there aren't that many of them. And then by the time you get to the turn, oftentimes these hands are going to bet smaller or check and just not do this. So I think this range is like going to have all 12 of the combos of kings and aces and only a few of the combos of jacks and 10s. So we're definitely taking the worst of it. And we're not just investing 47 here. You know, this is a spot where against a weaker player, against anyone really, you have to be aware at these stakes that you're going to be playing for stacks on the river the vast majority of the time. Calling turn to fold the river here is absolutely a no-no. It just makes no sense whatsoever. And you really just do have to decide whether this hand is good enough to put in another 100 big blinds from this point onwards. And I really don't think it is in these positions. I think it'll just be a bluff almost never. And it'll be aces and kings way more often than it's jacks and tens. So this, the fold here looks kind of nitty, but I actually think it's the best play. This is the 4 straight river. I think now, like, we are doing terribly and we should probably fold. Honestly. We do make the call, we run into aces. I mean, it just feels like a really unnecessary way of getting stacked. Like, yeah, okay, having queens against aces here in game theory is not a good spot. Maybe you end up calling down, but it's like really close to break even or something. But against a random weaker player at these stakes, you're just going to be taking the worst of it. You should be folding sooner. The turn is the place to fold here, and that would just save a ton of EV against this pool. Jack 8 of clubs, I don't know what we're doing. This is an example of being way too loose pre-flop. We've opened under the gun with a hand that's losing in equilibrium as an open. Like, we shouldn't be doing this. We've also flatted a 3-bet. I asked the student, like, what are we doing here? Why are you doing this? He says, well, I think I'm just getting impatient. I'm getting restless. I'm getting annoyed. It's like, okay, well, take a break. Don't play for so long. We shouldn't be taking out our frustration on our buttons at the table. It's okay if you want to, like, you know, get a bit annoyed if you get stacked a few times. You want to take a break. You want to storm off. You want to go for a walk. You want to vent. You want to shout something. You want to, like, mutter something under your breath. Okay, fine, but try not to take it out on the buttons that you press. Try not to do that, because the buttons that you press actually control your success in the long term. So this is a really bad pre-flop open and bad pre-flop call. Flop is whatever. We end up actually winning this hand, I think. I like the river call here. I think this is a really overbluff node where when they go bet, check, bet on this board, they're not sloping enough over pair on turn and they're just going to have way too many big cards here. So I think river's a really easy call, regardless of what theory would say. Villain has king queen, so I like post flop, but yeah, pre-flop, not a fan at all. Just completely reckless, needless kind of mistake, and that is one of the things that is destroying the student. So that's an example of getting involved recklessly pre-flop, and also maybe an example of sloppiness, attention span, emotional regulation not being what it should be.